SantaCruzSentinel.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Reporter's Notebook from the Santa Cruz Sentinel. This is the podcast about covering the news in Santa Cruz County. I'm your host, Anthony L. Solis. Today, we're going to talk to you about mistakes. Mistakes in the newspaper, mistakes online, mistakes that we all make. And I thought that it would be great if we brought back Sentinel Managing Editor, Kara Meyberg. Guzman. Kara, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I have you on here because you are my boss and I can grovel for forgiveness for all of my mistakes that I make. The big mistake, the whole reason for doing this is when I put out the podcast last week, we were very excited, really excited to get it out. And what happened was somewhere along the line, the cover art said, "The Reporter's Notebook." I forgot the T. Now, it didn't used to say notebook. At some point, it said notebook, and we checked it. But when I made the high-res version, I don't know what happened. I messed up. I don't know where I messed up. I wish I did, because then I'd feel better about it. But yeah, it went out. It went online. And even to this day, right now, as of the time of recording, on Google Play, it still says notebook, and I can't get it to... I can't get it fixed, and it's driving me crazy. And Kara, you sent me an email the night we put the podcast out. What was that, Tuesday night?
Yeah, Tuesday.
Yeah. And yeah, she sent me a Slack, and we misspelled notebook on the podcast, and I couldn't fix it from home because I didn't have the files. I didn't bring my laptop home. There's nothing I could do about it. And I couldn't sleep. It drove me crazy. I mean, what was your thought when you saw that? I mean, did you just want to fire me right then and there?
My heart sunk because I knew how excited you were, especially about the podcast. And this is something we've been talking about for weeks and
months.
Yeah.
Since we were still in Scotts Valley.
You actually made the mock-up of that cover art months ago.
Yes, using some low-res art, and it said notebook.
Yeah.
So somewhere, and I used the same file, and I just swapped out some low-res for some high-res art. So somewhere along the line, I just moved something, dropped out the T, and we didn't check. And that's ultimately what it comes down to with mistakes is if you check, if you just look, then maybe you're going to make fewer mistakes. And we're a newspaper, and we're accountable for our mistakes. We're held to a higher standard, and we should be. We shouldn't, because the public relies on us to be factual in what we put in the paper or anything that we do. And I, in my younger days, I've been here 20 years, so I started in my early 20s, and I've made a lot of mistakes over you guys have anyone who's listening to this has seen my mistakes. You didn't know it was me doing it, but you've seen my mistakes in the paper.
What was your most memorable mistake?
Well, my most memorable, the one I remember most that it haunts me to this day. I wasn't with the Sentinel. I was with the Gilroy Dispatch, and I was like 19 years old. I knew everything of supposedly at 19 years old, except for how to spell. I wrote a headline. It was our main head on the front page, and it was on the Golden Globes. Only I misspelled globe and wrote glode, Glode, and it printed the next day, and this was before the newspapers had websites. And I felt awful. I felt absolutely miserable. And our sports editor at the time, Michael Urban, who was a KNBR host for a while, he actually got a little thing of Play-Doh and made a fake statue of a Golden Globe, but bent it over sideways and stuck it on my computer monitor. And he's like, "That's a Golden Globe." And I had to, I just knew. I couldn't live it down for the entire time that I was there, and it still haunts me. But in some ways, that's, I I want to be factual and I don't want to make mistakes. One of the things that makes me not want to make mistakes is knowing that I'll never live it down from the people at work. I'll get Jim Seamus will just tease me mercilessly if I make a massive mistake in the paper, and it'll be a good-natured teasing because all of us here have made mistakes. Do you have one that that just pops out?
My stomach is roiling just thinking about it right now, but a couple of months ago, right when I became managing editor, we had this front page headline where there was a spelling mistake. We actually had several letters to the editor about it. We had misspelled receive. Switched the E and I in receive, and the headline was California schools receive bad grades. The irony.
Oh my God. That's awful. I didn't know about that one. Yeah. I mean, those are the worst ones too, because not that there's any good ones, but it appears in print and it's on an education story and you screw up a massive, an easy word like that. But do you think, and I'm assuming that we fixed it online or it didn't run online?
The net headline was different.
Oh, so our web head was different. It didn't have that word in it.
Right.
And was it our mistake or was it the design center's mistake that we just didn't catch?
My philosophy is that any mistake that appears in our news pages is my bad. It doesn't matter.
The buck stops with you.
It doesn't matter who misspelled it, or who wrote the headline, or whatever. I'm the last one last eyes on the page. It's my fault. I should have caught it. My brother used to be a pilot, and I remember him telling me when I was young that anything that goes wrong with a plane is the commanding the pilot in charge's fault. So whether it's a design error, an engineering error, it's the pilot's fault because you should have caught it. So
yeah,
my bad. Yeah.
But that kind of leads me to a little debate that we were having based on our mistakes. And I think this is a good discussion because, who out there is perfect?
Yeah. I make mistakes every day.
We all make mistakes. We don't want to, and we certainly don't want them in the paper. And, the hope is that you have other people looking at, what you've done so that those mistakes can be caught. It led us to an argument or a discussion, a debate about accountability as far as in this new digital age, because it's very easy to say, to make a mistake and then go, well, obviously we didn't fix it for print, but we'll get it fixed online. We'll change it online. The mistake is gone. No more mistake in many ways. And back in the olden days when which I will stay a lot because I've been here forever, pre-internet, or at least when we posted everything, the newspaper, that was the final, you wanted to make sure it was right for the paper. And that was your accountability. You couldn't change it the next day or anything like that. A correction is the most that you could do. But the fact that it was a paper with a final deadline and that was our main focus, a print paper, kind of made you a little bit more aware of we got to make sure it's right. We got to check everything. And now I got to be honest, I don't think that exists as much. We don't physically build the paper here anymore. We don't design the paper here anymore. We look at what other people do and try to catch mistakes that way. But because we can change it, even if it's subconscious in the back of your head, it just feels, I don't know if it's us, the reporters, the editors, the designers up in Chico, like where it is, but somewhere there's just seems to be like, oh, we can just fix it online. And I don't think that's a good thing.
I would disagree. I mean, I don't know what it was like back in the day. I'm new to journalism, relatively new.
We put the newspaper out on stone tablets, actually, right. Back then.
I mean, all I really know is this brave new world of the last 5 years of journalism. And I personally feel a great sense of accountability. We are the paper of record for Santa Cruz County, and I take great pride in the paper. This whole team takes great pride that, our number one value here is truth. We're putting out things that are true. And that's what we're always looking toward, working toward, striving for. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything to compare it to, like what it was like before the internet, but I'm trying to get everything right, whether it's
right. And
the paper or the web.
Right. And I don't think that's not the case. I get this when I'm reading. I typically don't read important news on my phone or online. I read it in a print paper. I started out as a new news page designer, so I'm very much a print oriented person. But I've always felt that accountability when I'm reading things online isn't there. Like I could have read something that's incorrect, and I'm not going to go back and reread the same story, so I might not know that I read something wrong, even if it's been updated later. And me now as an editor, that type of thing bothers me, where that's my desire to make sure that I get it right the first time, because I know that not everybody is the news junkie that's going to go back and reread the story or see that there was an update. The story has been corrected. Whatever. I don't read things that way, so I know that other people don't as well, and that's my motivation, I should say. And I guess everybody wants to get it right, but everyone's got to have their own reasons or kind of ways to motivate them to make sure they get it right. That just happens to be mine. I
think for me, part of it's just a sense of pride, but also it's just the age that we live in. This, we live in the era where there's something called fake news, and
fake news.
There's this attack on journalism and what we do, and so I mean that's part of the reason I returned to journalism after a little break doing freelancing. Why I returned to the paper is because I felt like people who had I really felt that journalism was being attacked, and I wanted to be part of the local newspaper, part of making it stronger and making it, well respected.
Yeah, I have the sense of pride. I've always had the sense of pride with the paper, and I die a little inside every time I hear the word senile.
There's a ton of those little plays on the word Sentinel, which I won't. Repeat here.
Every paper has it. Everyone's hometown paper is the worst one.
Right.
Yeah. No matter where you are in the world. When I was in Gilroy, the Gilroy Dispatch, we were the Gilroy Dog Patch.
People love to hate on the Sentinel, and yes. I don't get it.
Well, I mean, look, I do get it. Just having, I put together the letters to the editor. Every day I have for at least a few days a week for 15 years. A little while ago, people started thinking that somebody new did it because I think they knew Don Miller was leaving or whatever. Like, oh, whoever this new person is doing it, same person, 15 years, same person. The letters changed, not the editor. And the letters have changed, but a lot of the ones who call us out, I try to make sure to run those and not hide them as much. And if it's a lot of people on the same subject, I'm like, okay, maybe not 40 letters on, this weird misspelling. But I can see how people would view us from the outside based on the letters to the editor or the online comments, that's going to be a whole nother topic for a podcast, online commenters. But I can see how they view us and why they might view us as the senile. I think the fact that I keep losing my train of thought might lead someone to be like, well, there's the senile right there. Sorry, people, we're new at this podcasting. I was talking to Jim Seamus just now and asked if Jim Seamus, a sports writer, and asked him if he had any mistakes that haunted him. And he had a couple, from the early days, but really he used to have a joke that is only funny if you're working at a newspaper, but otherwise it's scary. We used to do a press check when we were downtown. We had the press actually printing there. You could feel the building shake when the press ran. So we'd go downstairs. It's just like the movie, the Michael Keaton movie, The Paper, which is a great film. You should go watch it. But we'd go downstairs. We'd pull a page off the press and take a look at it. And every day Jim would come upstairs and he would go, Cardinals, instead of like the Santa Cruz Cardinals. Like that was the joke. Like, look, the headline says Cardinals. He told me that he has actually written Cradnals before, and he doesn't think that it ever ran, but it kind of reminded me that there are little jokes that people have done where you misspell something because you think it's funny, but that is a dangerous game to play. We had to suspend people. You probably don't know this story actually, because this is way before your time. We had to suspend, it was an intern and a copy desk person, because she wrote in a sort of a private joke. She knew who the copy editor was, who was going to read her what we call beat checks, so under cops and courts. And it was somebody at a fair, at the Santa Cruz County Fair, had to be taken to the hospital for excessive cotton candy ingestion, or the tongue turned too pink, something. It was like a little inside joke between them, but he didn't catch it. It's kind of sounds like he didn't read it, which is also a scary thing. It's not a good thing, but it ran. And that's the kind of thing that's just stupid.
She just made it up.
Yeah. It was a private joke that she thought that he was going to catch, like an inside joke, like, and he's going to turn around and be like, oh, hilarious, God. But he didn't catch it, and it ended up in the paper. And that's the kind of thing that's just stupid. It's boneheaded. And they both got suspended. And it's one of the only times that I can remember in my time here that, like, people were, that was a bad thing.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, there have been a couple of times, there have been some stories where I do think somebody did get fired for a story that was just so wrong. And, I'm not going to go into who it was or what the story was, but it was so wrong that there was correction and then corrections for the correction. And it ended up being like this, you have to go. That was back when we had 12, 13 reporters where people could spend a month or two working on a story and it still didn't work out very well. And those are the ones that are, as an editor, as a copy editor, from my point, I'm line editing, I'm looking for grammatical errors, punctuation as best I can under deadline, because sometimes you get 5 minutes to read a story and then, you got to send it away.
Right. Those
are the kind of things that we can't catch. Like, how am I going to know that this person's name is not that person, or this person didn't say that? It keeps me up at night, and I have woken up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my God, did I check that? And I've come into work at like 2 a.m. before I could log in remotely, and before I was married and had kids, there have been times when I've woken up at 2 or 3 a.m. and come into work, turn on the computer and check to make sure that I ended a story,
even though you couldn't do anything about it.
Even though I couldn't do anything about it, because I couldn't sleep. I was just sitting there like, did I do that? Did I finish? Did I end the story? That's actually one of our most common mistakes, because it can be kind of hard to tell. We see a low res version these days, but you can put the rest of a story off to the side of a page on the computer and see how many lines you have left over. I've got 3 extra lines left to the story. I'm going to have to trim it to make it fit. And then you forget to do it. And people don't check, or it's close to deadline. You got to send it out. And that happened. It still happens. And we try to catch it, make sure there's a period at the end. Back in the even older days, when I worked in Gilroy, we did manual paste up, where our strips of the column of copy would come out on pieces of paper, and we'd have to cut it out with X-Acto knives and run it through a waxer, put hot wax on the back of the paper, and we'd stick it up on a broadsheet. And so many times you'd have to cut between the lines to make the column go up to the next column. So you have a 3-column story, but it comes out as one long strip. So you have to cut it into 3 columns and fit it. And sometimes you have to cut out a paragraph and, move the rest of the column up just to get things to fit. And so at the end of the day, what you do is you take your finger and you run it down the page. And every time you felt a little break where you had cut something, you check to make sure that it made sense. Not as easy to do on the computer. I know it seems like, oh, you're on the computer, it'd be easier, you're on spell check or whatever. But when you do things like that, where you're cutting out paragraphs or whatever, you can forget to go back and check to make sure that it reads right. And again, those are the things that keep you up at night, and those are awful mistakes. And when we write corrections, the Sentinel does not say we regret the error or we apologize, but we regret the error. You can guarantee it. We regret the error. I'm sorry. Even if somebody gave us the wrong information, and we, that happens too. That's another type of mistake that we run. Somebody tells us the wrong name of something and we put it in, and then they call back and be like, oh, I got the name wrong. Sorry, it was this person. Well, we are kind of the ones held accountable for it.
Yeah, we're supposed to be fact-checking.
Right. We still regret the error.
Yeah.
But that's a different type of mistake than misspelling receive on the biggest headline.
Right. There's copy editing errors, there's mistakes, and there's failures, and they're all separate things. Yes.
I asked you last week if we had a written or if we had a policy for when we make a correction to a story, because we run the setting it straight. If we have a correction and we go in and we fix the story. So now, how are readers going to know that yes, we messed up, but we fixed it, and please forgive us?
Okay, so on page A4, occasionally you'll see that setting it straight thing at the bottom of coastlines where we write all our corrections. I think the only things that warrant a setting it straight are things where we say misspell a person's name, or, get a factual, get a fact wrong. Things where we...
we're not going to put the Sentinel misspelled receive in the headline. We regret the error kind of thing.
Yeah. So we're continuing to do setting it straights. And I think what we need to do a better job of is being transparent when we update an online article, and having a little sort of editor's note at the top saying this, when we have a correction online, let the reader know at the top of the story, like that, this story has been updated to include whatever.
Yeah, whatever the
change was to the original piece that was posted.
Right. Well, that's good to know. It's good to know for me, and I think the readers as well. It'd be, good for them to know. I hope everybody enjoyed our. I know that sometimes we were lighthearted about the mistakes that we make. I laughed, Kara laughed at this podcast, but I want to reassure everybody that we take them very seriously. We're people. We all make mistakes. There's just no other way to say it. There's not that many people left to double check us. And so we need to be better at checking ourselves. And hopefully we don't have any more reporter no-book issues, which I will never live down, and it will bother me. It will bother me at least for another week. An old copy editor, John McNicholas, Johnny Mac, once told me when I made a mistake, and I'd make a spelling mistake or something, because in my mind, I thought, and I still do think this, the newspaper is a historical record. Somebody 50 years from now might go into the library, open up, this day's paper and see, oh my God, you misspelled receive wrong, or if you got a fact wrong, they're going to think that is truth because they're not going to look at the next day and see the setting it straight. So that's always bothered me and weighed heavy on my mind. Johnny Mac had another way of looking at it. He just said, tomorrow, this will be wrapped around a dead fish. You'll have another chance to do it right. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Reporter's Notebook. Notebook. Send me an email, tsolis@santacruzsentinel.com, and let me know what you want to hear us talk about in regards to the Sentinel. We try to give you a behind-the-scenes look, some friendly debates. I hope to possibly have some common letter writers or some online commenters in. I hope to talk to some reporters at some point, maybe the ad director at some point, and I've even got some former reporters sort of lined up to come in and talk about their time at the Sentinel, some former freelancers as well, so look forward to that coming up. Thanks again for listening.